every business in the world ideally needs some sort of funding, but most of them aren't built for the crazy roller coaster ride that venture is. Venture is a business of outliers. Venture is a business of, hey, if we invest $1 today, can we get 100? And almost no businesses in the world can ever become that kind of size of a company. Somebody went to IIT, IIM, went to Wharton, Harvard, McKinsey, Bain, fancy CV, fancy career. That doesn't necessitate that they would make a great company. If you want to invest in companies, ideally you can be founder friendly or you can be company friendly. You can't be both.
The startups that come on Shark Tank, are they a good reflection of the Indian startup ecosystem? Hello everyone, this is Prantik and this is another episode of Thai Talks, and I happen to be in Mumbai and I have a very special friend, a very celebrated Thai charter member, and someone who is very active in the Indian startup ecosystem and the VC ecosystem, my friend Avik Ashar. Avik, welcome to the Thai Talks podcast.
Thanks, Prantik. Really excited to be doing this with you.
So Avik, I'm going to dive in straight. I've learned so much from our interactions, from your stories, from your LinkedIn, very pragmatic things that you share. And it's nearly been a year that you've transitioned. You've left us in Singapore and you've moved to a very hot startup ecosystem in India. My first question to you is, you've been an active angel investor for a while. How would you describe the Indian startup ecosystem today compared to, let's say, a decade ago?
I started investing through pure serendipity. I was working with a technology company, in fact, one of the most unsung technology companies in India called DirectEye. And at that point in time, there was no investors, there was no angels, venture capital, absolutely nothing. Starting from there, I got poached by a family office. And we were probably one of the first 10 family offices in the entire country to actively look at it in a formal manner, look at the Indian startup ecosystem and begin investing. The funniest thing, now today Shark Tank is a household name and everybody understands it. But my first experiences of that were in the Indian Angel Network, where we'd meet typically at the NSE, the National Stock Exchange's office in BKC, where we'd sit down and we'd have a whole bunch of entrepreneurs come meet us, and we'd be 15 or 20 of us sitting in a room. We'd just chat with these founders and understand what's motivating them, what's driving them, what are they trying to build. And it was incredible because at that point in time, nobody understood the concept of a startup. I continued working there, working with the family office, built it up, and then came my exit from India, where I got poached by a Southeast Asian startup. So I left the Indian ecosystem at a very interesting and pivotal moment. When I came back, the first thing that I would say and I'd look at is startups are now looked at with respect. And I do have to give credit to Shark Tank, to folks like the Sharks today, a whole bunch of founders who actually went out there, created success, showing people that, hey, a startup is not something that should be looked down upon. But today a family can actually say, okay, beta is not becoming a doctor, beta is not becoming a lawyer or an engineer, but they're becoming a founder, and they can say it with pride. Right. So that is the first and biggest change that I've seen in the entire Indian ecosystem.
Fabulous, right? I mean, over the decade, I was just looking at some stats from 40 to 118 plus unicorns. What's the contrast that you see or you've seen between Southeast Asian ecosystem, the startup ecosystem there, and today's Indian ecosystem?
It's interesting because Southeast Asia and India have a lot of parallels, where Southeast Asia is a collection of loosely 6 to 7 countries. Every country operates differently. Every place has different languages, cultural norms, the way that they work, the way that they think, the way that they consume, and the way that you have to interact with team members if you're building there. I think India is very similar. When you look at India, when you go from the north to the south, every 500 kilometers, the language changes. And with the language changing, the entire mindset of people changes. What they want, what they aspire to. People's thought processes on what is success, what do they like wearing. Every single thing changes as you move across the country from south to north or north to south, east to west. And that's very similar to Southeast Asia. So I draw those parallels, being the two broad markets are quite similar in that sense. Where India, I feel, has an edge at this point is that it is still one unified market.
Yeah.
And with the advent of things like the goods and service tax, that advantage that India is finally kind of coming into its own and saying, hey, we are one country, we are one nation, let's try and remove at least trade barriers within the nation itself, which I think if Southeast Asia can get to that point with a deeper connection and partnership and relationship, obviously driven by Singapore, and I know that Thai Singapore will be leading that charge, then I think that that would really benefit the Southeast Asian ecosystem.
And that maturity of the Indian ecosystem, would you say it's because over the last decade or so, infusion of foreign capital, or is it on the exit side that we have a deeper strategic exit and the IPO markets, whether the main board or even the secondary board, which side, or is it the national, budgets or policies? What are some of the other elements beyond the unified market that you think has led India to where it is today?
Well, I think the first and very obvious one, not to be biased, but it is pure and sheer talent. Indians have led the charge around the world. We have, I think, 30% of Fortune 100 companies CEOs at this point.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's a crazy ratio from one particular demographic.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of those ground roots were laid by the education system, extreme levels of rigor in math, in terms of STEM, in terms of logical thinking driven by our Indian IITs, IIMs. The second piece would be that a lot of Indians have gone abroad, studied abroad, worked abroad ideally, and are on their way back. The second piece most definitely is the fact that we have an active and roaring IPO market, public equities market. That does two things in my opinion. The first is it provides a much needed amount of liquidity. Yeah. It provides an exit opportunity for large companies, and it brings discipline. Because once you have a main board, once you have a public market comparable to whatever you're doing, you can value yourself at 30x revenue. Yeah. If the public markets value you at 10x revenue, that is what you're going to eventually list at.
Yeah.
And that is what you have to work towards. It sets a standard of governance in terms of what your numbers and your metrics should look like, which, in my opinion, for a while was missing in Southeast Asia, where valuations were driven by a huge influx of foreign capital coming in, without really looking at what's going to happen next. Where are we going to list? Are we going to IPO?
Beautiful. I'm going to touch upon a word that you just used, governance. This is clearly a challenge in India as well as in Southeast Asia, because you've been on both sides. Whose problem is it? Founder or the investor?
A lot of it is driven by the mindset which you're in. So let me maybe dial this back with a story from Zilingo.
Please.
And our thought process at the time. When in about 2018, that was when we had one of the biggest venture tourists ever enter with $100 billion fund.
Yeah.
SoftBank.
Yeah.
They could single-handedly change the fortunes of a company. They could change the fortunes of a small country at some point. So when you had firms that look to weaponize capital, any company operating in any space at some point realized that, hey, you know what, no matter how well I perform, no matter how good my metrics are, if I'm not the anointed or the chosen one to get that $1 billion check, I can be killed. I can simply be outspent and be killed. And that was a very real fear for founders across the world. There needs to be a little bit of empathy to understand that a founder is anyway struggling. As a founder, you're trying to keep the lights on, you're trying to balance your own personal life, you're trying to balance fundraising, you're trying to balance the fact that you are responsible now not for yourself and your family, but for the livelihoods of everyone who's working with you, who depends on you for their next paycheck. The second aspect here that I would bring in is, if you look at the evolution of the venture space, venture's only been around for about 60 years as a concept in the world. Silicon Valley was built off operators. Don Valentine himself, the founder of the most storied firm in the world, Sequoia, was a product of Fairchild Semiconductors. He was a hardcore operator, and he was one of the best sales guys Fairchild ever had, which is why when he exited, he had a certain amount of seed capital, which is what he used to create a behemoth, which is Sequoia. And that kind of changed the entire US philosophy of venture investing, where definitely you bring in experts in financial management and wizardry, but they are partnered with folks who have built things, who really understand operations at a deep level.
Yeah.
Now, the problem when I saw this trickle down into the Southeast Asia and the India markets is the financial wizards were there, but the operators, the folks who understood the nitty-gritties, the pains of building a business, weren't present. So when everything was being driven by Excel sheets, it led to what we had over the last few years.
Further, something else you write and speak about very often is that not every venture or business is venture investable. Can you unpack that for us?
Every business in the world ideally needs some sort of funding, but most of them aren't built for the crazy roller coaster ride that venture is. Venture is a business of outliers. Venture is a business of, hey, if we invest $1 today, can we get 100? And almost no businesses in the world, barring like this tiny little sliver, can ever become that kind of size of a company. You can build brilliant businesses. The world is built on micro, small, and medium enterprises. Great companies doing consulting, doing digital transformation, doing manufacturing, doing a whole bunch of different activities which can grow pretty steadily, which can grow 10, 20% year on year in the beginning as they're young and then slow down a little bit over time. But to be a venture backable business, you need to be able to grow at a rocket ship pace, which most aren't.
So, from a venture capital side, if you wear that hat of yours, what are some of the macro factors that sort of come in sort of modeling the deployment aspect of the fund whilst managing the 2% management fee and keeping the lights on, right?
Venture works on a simple model. It's called 2 and 20. It means that there's a 2% management fee year on year. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to say for 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, for 100 million, that means you've got $20 million for management fees. Now, while that might sound, oh, wow, you're rich, you're done, you don't need anything more. That's to keep the lights on, to pay rent, to pay salaries. You need to have a fairly large team, to manage compliance, to manage travel, because you definitely want to go and meet the people that you're going to put money in and partner with for 10 years, face to face. So that money, while it seems like a big number, isn't actually that much. Beyond that, the other incentive in venture is the 20, which is called carried interest. Very simple. If I take that 100 and I make that 300, 20% of the profit, the 200 profit, belongs to the venture capital fund. So we are fairly aligned on incentives where we only make money, we only make that 20% if we generate profits for our investors. When it comes down to modeling, my personal method of evaluation is, what outcome do you need? For $100 million fund to return a good quality exit to their investors, you need to return a minimum of 300 million.
Fair.
If you don't, it's considered a failure.
Yeah.
Given the amount of risk.
So 100 becomes 300 in 10 years, let's say.
100 becomes 300. Now, I'm going to add the second fun variable. 100 doesn't become 300. 80 has to become 300 because you're using 20 to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
So you now have to take 80 and turn it into 300, which is a bigger challenge. And now when you're looking at that 300, you need to decide, all right, I've got 80 million. Should I just give 80 startups $1 million each?
Yeah.
That's one method of doing it. Yeah. Commonly known as the spray and pray.
Yeah.
Do I give 10 startups $8 million each? Is that a sensible way to do it? That leans more towards private equity. Do I take something in the middle? So I look at it as, what are my outcomes? Now, if you look at India, the typical successful company exits at somewhere between a $400 to $500 million range.
Right.
So I now know my exit number. To get there, there are going to be various stages of investment. Every time a new investment happens in a company, the percentage stake that you own goes through something called dilution, which means that 10% will become an 8%, will become a 5%. At the end of time, when that company hits, let's say, $500 million, you're lucky to own about 3% of the company. So I now have two variables. I have my exit outcome. I have my percentage that I own. The third variable is the hardest to predict, which is how many companies do I have to invest in to get a few exits at $500 million.
Yeah. And how do you sort of factor in that math, given the dilution, So if you have 100 or if you have 80, how much of that is kept aside for sort of doubling down?
So there's a brilliant lecture by a Stanford professor who turned into a venture capitalist.
Okay.
So his perspective was just give everybody all the capital upfront. Now that may work better on a statistical model.
Sure.
But when I look at the Indian context, and I can speak a little bit about my personal experience at Artha, we typically double down. So our first check is about $500,000. Our second check is $1 million. Our third check is $2 million. And we purposely break this capital down because we know that after giving a company a $500,000 check, sure, let's say we invest in 30 companies. There will be 5 who knock it out of the park. Everybody wants them. They're the hottest person in the room, and every VC in the world is running after them to give them a check. But there'll be another 10, which are good businesses, but they're just struggling to get to that next level. They need that little bit of extra boost, that little extra capital, which an external investor will look at them and think, maybe, maybe not. That's where, as an existing investor, you need to show support to your portfolio companies. And while we can say, hey, support can be, I'm there for you, you can cry on my shoulder, I will come and help you pack parcels, the real truth is support is capital.
Yeah.
That's the biggest support that we can give.
Right.
So keeping that reserve capital for your companies, while it may not be the absolute best from a mathematical standpoint, is extremely important from a logical and empathetical standpoint.
Interesting. Now, a couple of hard questions to the VC in you. Maybe you've heard of these criticisms as a VC. One is this notion of smart capital. There are many founders who sort of cry foul that, boss, once the money comes in, there have been horror stories. And again, these could be outliers, but I want to take your perspective of, one is honesty, that man, once I've given you capital, that's my main job. Smart capital, too much to expect, given that you might have a large portfolio to manage. Or are there good examples that you've seen where there are genuine cases where a VC goes way beyond cutting that check? What's the state of the union in that sense in India today?
Earlier, VCs were financial wizards. Today, I'd say it's close to a 40-60% split, where you are moving towards about 40% of experienced founders, people who have run businesses. And when I say experienced operators, I'm not limiting it to, oh, you should have built a company. No, you could have built somebody else's company. So I'd say that shift is happening today. And when you say smart capital, I'd say smart capital highly is dependent on the quality of the team that you're working with.
Yeah.
So it's very important for you for anyone as a founder to look at the profile of the management, to look at the profile of the investing team, and then decide for themselves, hey, in this particular field, or generally in the field of building a business, are the folks I'm taking money have more experience than me, or do they not? So that's where I draw the line on smart capital.
So the good news I hear is that given more operators have turned investors, or these large MNCs that are either buying companies, I think HUL had a great deal with Minimalist. I think you're saying with that flavor of the investor changing, founders are likely to get more operating support.
Absolutely.
And the other sort of question that comes about the VC model is, do you have a portfolio? Again, take that 100 million example, out of that 80 gets invested. Let's say you've spread it across maybe 20 companies, right? Out of your 20 companies, let's say 5 are your outliers or doing really well. What happens? Who takes care of that remaining 15? Or is the answer, too bad. As a VC, my job is to make money for my LPs. Let me handle the 5. I don't care about the rest.
The answer is actually kind of in between what you just said. The truth about life is the Pareto principle. The 80-20 principle governs everything in life. 20% of what you do will give you 80% of the outcome. And that there's no place where that has more truth in than venture. Right. So when it comes to capital, yes, I have to be ruthless. I have to be merciless, because my responsibility, my fiduciary duty is towards the investors who've given me that capital. Is to make sure that I maximize the returns for them. So will I invest more in the ones which I'm very clear are not going to perform? The sad truth is absolutely not. That being said, are there ways to empathetically work with the founders? Can I counsel them to move off the VC path? Sometimes just say, hey, listen, this business is not going to scale the way you think it is. Move towards profitability, run this as a
As
as a
EBITDA positive,
good quality EBITDA
business.
positive growing business.
Yeah.
And at some points, I even have to sit down and take the hard call and say, listen, my strong suggestion to you is close this down. I coin it as the point of no return. My point of no return has always been, do you have 3 months of salaries in the bank for your team? If you really want to stretch that boundary, you can take it to 2, but that should be your drawn point of no return. If you cannot fulfill your obligations, first to your team, secondly to your customers and vendors, that's the point where you need to draw the line and say this business is
Not working.
not working. It's time to close it. In terms of taking that responsible call of ending things cleanly for a company to make sure that all your customers have been taken care of. I've seen folks who, when they're shutting down their company, literally make sure that they've paid enough and they've spoken to their team. They're like, hey, are 2 of you okay running these servers and doing maintenance for 1 year?
Yeah.
And we'll compensate. And you're free to moonlight. You're free to work elsewhere.
Yeah.
But can you maintain this running? Because we have sold a product to our customers for a year. Can you maintain it for these customers for that year? Paid off the rest of the team, returned whatever capital is left to the VCs. And would I back that founder again? 100%. I'd back that founder tomorrow.
Integrity.
Just about integrity.
Lovely. Tell me about your journey of traversing from being a very prolific angel to being a VC. As a investor, what does a VC versus an angel look at a founder or a company differently? How does, if an angel wants to become a VC, what tenets or what sort of outlooks need to change? How has that journey been for you?
Until now, my first investment experience was a family office.
Yeah.
While I was running somebody else's capital, it was still with the lens of this is proprietary capital. It's literally as good as being an angel. So when you're looking at it from a family lens, the first thing you don't have ticking is a painful drawdown. So as a VC, the first thing I had to remember was, wait a minute, I have to take all this capital and I have to deploy it within 4 years or maybe stretch it to 5, but
That's it.
that's it. So I have a hard deadline on how I have to deploy. The second thing that hit me was how much I am reliant on other people. Because as a family office, I'm very okay if a company probably doesn't raise the next round and moves very quickly towards the, hey, I'm going to go on an EBITDA positive path. And give me 6, 7, 8, 10 years. I'll give you an IPO. You'll make good money. You'll get your returns. Or I'll give you dividends.
Yeah.
But versus in a fund, you're trying to outreach so much more. Your diligence that you have to perform, both between obviously some norms that come from your regulators. So Singapore's MAS, SEBI over here, fairly stringent on the amount of compliance checks that you have to do. And then the second part is you actually conduct deep financial, legal, and even technical due diligences. So you need to work on that. The third thing I have to worry about is, where's the guy going to get the next round?
Because that's only then do you make money.
No, only then am I guaranteed that this company is going to go upwards. I mean, very few companies generate the level of profits that they can scale at the way I want them to, just naturally. So where is the guy going to get the next round from?
And you have that ticking time bomb of the next 5 years.
And
first 5 for deployment and the next 5, 6
where I have to start harvesting and getting my capital back. So my next problem is who's going to fund it? And probably the most pressing would be, how am I going to get that exit back? It's very, very, very easy to write a check. Here's money. It's very, very, very hard to steer the company towards a very real exit. The amount of people that you have to align, the amount of egos that you have to align, I'd say 30% of the job is being a psychotherapist. So you really have to play crisis manager, therapist, friend, and sometimes just the hard moderator where, hey, this path is just not the right path. You're not doing it right. Let's course correct. Let's stop. Let's pause. Let's rethink this. And then when you really want that exit, you still have to negotiate with the next guy.
Yeah.
Because the next person will come in and say, hey, I like the company, but I'm going to buy you out at 50% of your value. Because I know you have your ticking time bomb and you need to exit this company. Everyone knows it. So managing all of that and being able to exit and return capital to investors is not as easy. Like, VC is not as easy as it sounds or looks on paper.
Having spent some time in the VC ecosystem, if you were to sort of step out and zoom back and zoom out and say, what are some innovations or changes the VC industry, top three in your mind that come, that the VC industry itself needs to innovate and change?
Well, the first one, which I have reiterated, is it's a mix of finance and operations. Like if you want to invest in companies, ideally you need folks who understand building a company in some form or the other. So that's probably the number one piece of advice I would give. The second one is, and this one I'm fairly pedantic about as well, is you can be founder friendly or you can be company friendly.
Lovely.
You can't be both. There are many decisions that you may make, and a lot of them are made at the initial point of time when you're working on handing the check. It's not as easy as handing the check. There are like 3 months of legal documentation and work that go in before a check is passed. And during that time, you're laying out the blueprint of your interactions with that founder in the company, namely from various rights, your governance rights. What can I do in case X happens? What can I do in case Y happens? Your information rights. How much information am I going to take from you on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? And third is, how involved am I going to be in your running of your business? Now, the answer to the third one is, I don't want to run your business. That's why we're investing. But do I want certain says? And a lot of this changes based on the maturity of the founders, the experience that they've had. But you really need to negotiate and look at your governance rights a lot better. If you just walk in with eyes closed, hand a check, continue keeping your eyes closed, head under the sand, everything is fine.
Yeah.
Then that's going to become a problem. And the third thing I'd probably say is, this one is something that is a bit closer to my heart.
Yeah.
Is spend a bit more time with non-obvious founders. So sure, somebody went to IIT, IIM, went to Wharton, Harvard, McKinsey, Bain, fancy CV, fancy career. That doesn't necessitate that they would make a great entrepreneur. It really doesn't.
You know, Avik, that brings me to my segue, a beautiful segue about, that you said some of these usual parameters don't necessitate success, right? Let's zoom out at the India macro situation today. You started by talking about Shark Tank, right? Are the startups that come on Shark Tank, two questions, right? Are they a good reflection of the Indian startup ecosystem, or because for the show it's gamified to have consumerish startups? Nothing wrong with the sector, but is it a reflection of the Indian startup ecosystem? And B, of late, a lot of criticism about the sharks. So the sharks are in the red ocean. Is that a problem or not really? So 2 questions about the macro Shark Tank environment we're operating in India.
So I think let's just dial back to the main point, which is, what has it done for the country?
Yeah.
It has democratized entrepreneurship. It's made it fun. It's made it approachable. And more importantly, it's made it respectable. So I think on that front, 10 on 10 points given. In terms of the companies that come there, absolutely. I definitely feel that there's a very, very, very strong tilt towards consumer-driven companies because it's just easier to relate to.
Yeah.
That being said, one of my own personal pride of my portfolio companies, Unfiltered, went up on Shark Tank, and Prateek went up with a very strategic aspect.
Right.
His perspective was, he didn't come for the money. He came because he runs a company called the Yarn Bazaar, which is in one of the most traditional spaces you can get in the world, which is in textiles, in a micro niche segment called yarn, which is, by the way, a $200+ billion market globally, but it's so nichely focused. And one of the challenges that he was facing for a while was, barring the folks who knew him, third generation textile entrepreneur who opened up very quickly, the next set of people was, what is this digitization? I don't know. Who are you? You're 30 years old. I don't trust you. You have to have white hair. I do have white hair, but I'm not there. But you have to have white hair for me to trust you. And that was a very painful piece of the ecosystem, the yarn ecosystem. Once Prateek got off Shark Tank, he's like, Avik, I don't need to look for customers or vendors for the next 2 years. My inboxes are flooded. So the amount of trust that just being on TV earned him was, I mean, you could put a dollar value to it, and that dollar value is massive. So that really helped. Definitely, they do lean towards kind of drama bazi and consumer companies that would make a little bit of a fun conversation, but it's a TV show
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And in terms of the second piece, which is the sharks running loss-making companies, now, I mean, there are some fantastic folks and fantastic companies, and I'll focus on two on amazing people. Anupam Mittal is one of the first folks who guided me on how to invest.
I didn't know that.
He was one of the founding members of Indian Angel Network, was super approachable. I mean, met him. Even back then, he was still the founder of Shadi.com, which is a big thing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you've got a Piyush, who's built a brilliant brand that is now taking, I mean, it's one of the first brands where I can see where India is going properly international.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a lot of valuable like knowledge, insight, and experience from the founders. Sure, they play up aspects of their personality to be fun on TV. But I mean, the reality is everyone is a strong entrepreneur.
Overall, it's a plus.
Yeah.
Let's talk about IPOs. Last year, September, Bonanza. I saw another graphic which says if all goes well, the markets are not great right now, but all goes well, we might have 40, 45
For this
IPOs
year, yeah, 40,
this year.
45 IPOs.
But the flip side is there's also some thoughts that post IPO, when it pops, whether it's been a Swiggy, whether it's been a few others, things for the pre-IPO investors, the party hasn't lasted for too long. Is that a short-term thing? Do you think these IPOs will help investors, late-stage investors or retail investors who partake in the IPO? Will it help them make money?
Well, I think the one thing that, I mean, if you go back to like the godfather of investing, Benjamin Graham, and then his protege, Warren Buffett, you can't time the market. You can't. It's virtually impossible. What IPOs do to companies, and I mean, I can use Zomato as an example.
Yeah.
When it IPO'd, I will say I wasn't the most bullish on the company. I was like, hey, you know what? Delivery is a money-burning loser. It's very hard to make money there. Listing fees, advertising, not much. I was struggling to understand how is this company going to go from a young growth company, which is like hustling, running around, trying different things, experimenting, to a slightly more mature company, which starts improving its operations, starts generating real cash. And I think Zomato is one example where they really built that turnaround. So while everyone looks at Zomato and thinks, hey, food delivery and stuff delivery, like Blinkit.
Yeah.
My favorite business within that company is a business called Hyperpure, which is silently going across the country and powering the B2B procurement of restaurants. So I'm like that, and virtually nobody looks at that. My eyes are only just on Hyperpure because I'm like, that is taking the distribution power that you've created through Zomato and then turning that into a profitable and value-adding B2B business. I think that when IPOs happen, they really force companies to grow up. For some of them who are close to growing up, it's slightly painful, but they get there. For companies that still think that they're teenagers and suddenly they're forced into kind of the adult world, it can be a really, really bumpy and hard transition. And I think for retail investors, in the long run, for sure, I think most of these companies should turn out to become fairly stable, fairly strong companies. They'll take some time to right size in terms of valuations, grow into those numbers. In terms of short-term stock advice, I have no clue.
Let's talk about the government. Clearly, in the last decade, there's been a lot of support policy-wise, infrastructure-wise at a national and state level. 2-3 things that you think in the last 1 or 2 years that the government's done really well, that's lent itself very well and useful for the ecosystem?
I think I'll have to go with number one, abolishing the angel tax.
Thank God.
It was a desperately needed move because as a personal angel investor, as a VC who now waits for companies that have received angel investment and then come graduate to me, the entire ecosystem is built around angels. And if you aren't taking care of them, if you aren't making sure that they can invest in companies, and more importantly, that these fledgling startups can raise without worrying about a GST raid and a notice tomorrow or an ED raid on their house tomorrow, that was one of the biggest moves. Beyond that, the second one would be enabling, obviously, through capital. The fund of funds that the governments are setting up, the first 10,000 crore fund from SIDBI, the new funds that they're allocating, once again, another 10,000 crore at a macro level. And then on micro levels, there's a portfolio company of mine called Optimize Electrotech. They are building defense technology from India for India. They won an IDEX award. IDEX is the Ministry of Defense running these competitions. And, the skeptic in me was sadly, hey, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to materialize. Okay, the award was granted, given the award, a nice piece of paper was given, it's going to stay there. It took some time. But the next thing I know, the founder, Sandeep, calls me up and says, Avik, we were just allotted 25 crore grant from the government. Grant, non-dilutive, equity-free. This is a grant to help further the fact that you're creating something that we need.
Right.
That blew me away. And not only that, when you win the IDEX, you effectively win one contract with the government. All subsequent contracts are through merit, but you will win one contract guaranteed. So that's
a great enabler.
It's a great enabler. And the third one, which I think a lot of folks don't realize is out there, is this wonderful place called iHub in Gujarat. And this has been set up under the auspices of the Gujarat government. Obviously, Central has been giving a lot of help. And these kind of hubs are being set up, like how T-hubs there in the south, these hubs are being set up across the country. They have a state-of-the-art facility that can house about 1,000 plus people, seats. These seats are being rented out at 3,000 rupees a month. And when I asked the CEO, I was like, dude, 3,000 rupees a month, why are you even charging the money? He's like, Avik, we're charging them the money so that they get in the habit of tracking finances. Not only that, they have subsidized AI labs, they have subsidized 3D printing labs. Every lab you can think of, they have actually got these at massively subsidized rates. So I think that definitely, while there is a lot more that can be done, there is a lot of good things that are happening.
Really encouraging to hear. We've had discussions around sectors that India hasn't been doing much in. If you have to pick 3 sectors just based on your life in Mumbai, what are some 2 or 3 sectors that you want to see emerge?
I definitely think that as a country, we are going through that kind of inverted U curve on the pollution scale. And it has to be taken more seriously. People have compared the equivalent of living in a Mumbai or a Delhi today as anywhere between half a pack to 1 pack of cigarettes a day. It's reducing people's lifespans while also creating a massive potential public health cost down the line.
Yeah.
Where suddenly you just got a whole bunch of people who have breathing problems, cancer, various other related issues, heart issues. All of these stem from the air we breathe. So I think that in terms of moving to a greener solution, whether it's carbon capturing, whether it's cleaner solutions for transportation, we massively need to invest in green solutions.
Right.
That would be number one. I think the second sector that we need to put a little bit more focus on is manufacturing. We could potentially be a manufacturing superpower. We have the largest, if I'm not wrong, youth population in the world today.
Yeah.
Over about 600 million people under the age of 30. And this number can be mobilized into becoming a manufacturing hub. However, we just aren't making our manufacturing more efficient with software. And I remember at TiE Singapore, there were 2 lovely founders who were building a company called Sixth Sense, focusing on semiconductor manufacturing and making it more efficient. And that's brilliant. And I just want a lot more innovation in that space. There's a sector that I really focus on. When I came to Bombay, one of my first thought processes was, hey, you know what? While my family's here, I'm used to living alone. Let me take a small serviced apartment. Why should I rent a full house and manage it? And I started looking around, and there were no serviced apartments that catered to a mid-senior management, working professional.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing. At the top end, you have a Taj Wellington Mews and a Four Seasons. One day I'll be there, but today I can't do that. And then at the tail end, you have a bunch of these hostels and baby co-living places, which once again, I'm not going to live there anymore. But for working professionals, which a large chunk of Mumbai's population is migratory, similarly with Bengaluru, similarly with Delhi, with any of your major hubs in the country, you've got migrating population, people who need housing and need better solutions. Ideally, you'd want your laundry, your food, your basic household necessities to be solved for. You don't want to worry about furnishing things.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a single solution. And I was like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
So, as a good VC should, the next thing I did was I went around looking for the potential solutions, and we've not completed the investment in them yet, so I won't share the name. But we are investing in a business there very, very soon. And
What's that? How do you define? What's the name for that category?
so I call it managed living.
Right.
It's simply managed living. And let me just paint a picture of this to anyone who's young and living anywhere in the world, and you're thinking about, and young doesn't mean you're a bachelor. You could be a couple, both of you are working, both of you are having a hectic life. Think about this. You come in, you check in to your home. You can customize a little bit of it. You may have a small dry pantry. You may have a wet pantry if you want it. You come there, you go upstairs. There's a lovely television. There's air conditioners. There's your water purifiers. Everything your beds are beautiful.
Modern amenities.
Every modern amenity you'd ever need is within your house. You wake up in the morning. You go downstairs. You go to the gym, or you go upstairs to the infinity pool on the rooftop. You change, you come back down. When you're about to leave, you go out to the in-house restaurant where they have already prepared your portioned meal based on the meal plan that you have selected, that you take to your office. You eat it. You come back home. In the evening, you decided to host some friends. You don't take them up to your house. You've booked the downstairs lounge area where your food is catered from the restaurant, again, at basically cost price.
Yeah.
If you're choosing to serve drinks, the drinks are also catered from there, or you bring your own, whichever one you want. You have a great time. You leave everything where it is, and then you go back upstairs and it'll be cleaned up. That's the life that I'm investing
I would call that utopia. But looking forward to that investment. Avik, now in the last segment, we're going to try and unpack a few things about your life, right? I'll start with just give us a view of what's a day in Avik's life, right from whenever you wake up till you go to bed.
I'm absolutely not a morning person, and I've had to force myself over the years to kind of become one. Still wake up about 7:45, 8. I typically don't touch my phone for about 40 minutes. I leave it in the corner, get ready, try and sit down, just visualize kind of what my day is going to look like. Quick breakfast of fruit, book an Uber, head to office. My team knows the traditional rule is if you want to have a good day with Avik, no meetings before 11. Right. Get in, plug into music, and clear my inbox. It's the one thing that I just love doing, sitting and listening to music in the morning, noise cancelling, clear my inbox. Then I move into pitches, because I always want to address startup founder pitches when you're at the top of your energy level, which for me is 11.
Yeah.
For some, it might be say 8 in the morning, and for me, it's 11.
Yeah.
So my pitches happen between 11 to 1, 2. Sometimes we even have lunch during the pitches because it just makes it optimal usage of time. Once you move from your pitches, you then move to your portfolio time. So then I spend time with my analysts and associates, understand what's happening with my different portfolio companies, take a look at what they might need, where we might need to help them, look through their numbers. Then in the evening is where I give, sometimes it's overlapping from office, sometimes it happens after. I always keep a window of time which I just give to any founder or anyone who wants to talk to me. And this is a rule I've learned from various mentors in my life. Just give people some time. No expectations. If nothing comes back, I don't care. Yeah. It's about if the request has come with enough context, always give time. So I generally carve out about an hour and a half for that. And then some evenings, the other peril of being a VC is that you need to know what's happening in the market. Now, the only way you can do that is to meet other founders and to meet other investors.
Yeah.
So it then moves to either sometimes a game of paddle, which is the healthier aspect, or sometimes it's to a restaurant, or sometimes it may be to a bar with a bunch of other founders and investors. And then you rinse and repeat.
Fascinating. Rapid fire.
Yes.
Your favorite founder?
No, not answering that, no.
Right, pass. Your favorite investor, except yourself?
It would have to be Don Valentine. father of this entire industry.
Easiest channel for a founder to reach Avik Ashar?
LinkedIn. I am responsive to a fault. Within 24 hours, you typically get a response.
A book that you're reading currently?
Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss.
Your favorite book?
Oh, this is easy. It's the King Killer Chronicles. Unfortunately, there are only 2 out of the 3 released by an author called Patrick Rothfuss. It reads like poetry.
Your favorite podcast? Barring Thai Talks.
Barring Thai Talks. It would, for entertainment value included, it has to be All In from the US.
I love that. That's my favorite. Delhi or Bombay as a city to live and work in?
Very, very hard. I would flip a little. Mumbai for the people, Gurgaon for the lifestyle.
Singapore or India?
Personal life,
Yeah.
Singapore. Professional life, India.
Well said. One message to all your friends back in Singapore from a lens about participating in the Indian startup ecosystem. So not just the Indian diaspora, your Singaporean friends, Southeast Asian friends. What would be that message about the ecosystem?
I think every single person from Singapore and the broader Southeast Asian ecosystem can work with India in some way. If you have capital and you're looking to get probably some of the most exciting market in the world, invest here. If you're a startup founder, hell, come and work here for a startup for a year. You will learn more about building companies and the famous Indian concept of jugaad than you will ever learn anywhere else in the world. And if you want to partner and bring Indian companies into the Southeast Asian ecosystem, I think there's a huge play for that piece as well. So overall, the focus is start understanding and paying attention to what's happening here, because there is a lot.
Final one, parting message to your friends in Thai Singapore.
I miss you. Please visit more.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end. And Avik, you've done such a wonderful job. To me, I think if I have to describe you, you're just generous with your time and wisdom. We love that about you. Thank you for sort of giving your time to me tonight at such short notice. Keep doing the wonderful things that you do for the ecosystem. And we'll hopefully do more episodes.
Most definitely.
Thank you. This is Prantik and Avik signing off for Thai Talks from Mumbai. Thank you.
Thank you.